Hello, everyone. Yay. Okay. Thank you for all of you who are watching our live, trying to get on live. So we're here with Janet Farnsworth. Am I saying your last name right, Janet?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes. And this sweet, sweet lady who her and I have been walking very, very similar paths in the journey of supporting women to love their bodies, love themselves, love their life. I love that. Love your body, love your life. Yes. And both Janet and I live here in Maui. Janet's written 2 books that I'm very excited to hear more about today. And
Okay.
you're on a book tour right now. Not a book tour, you're on your Love Your Body tour.
Yes, I'm a Love Your Body tour. I'm on a body immersion tour. That
So
sounds so fancy.
it is fancy. It's amazing.
As I sit here in front of like the world's oldest, ugliest sofa, but it's comfortable. It's part of my tour. But yes, is what I
Well,
am.
I mean, there's a music tour, right?
Yes.
People going, and you're going around and sharing your wisdom around loving your body and loving yourself and all that comes with that. And we all know how much comes with that, you know,
Yes.
especially women being in a body at this time and age.
Mhm.
And so I'd love for you to share just a little bit with me and
Mhm.
with the people in the group a little bit more about your journey and
Mhm.
what has gotten you. And I know that's a huge question because when people ask me, it's like, oh, girl, there's so much to say around that. And it's always so curious actually what comes out. You know,
Mhm.
there's so many
Mhm.
different parts of the journey.
Yeah.
So what has led you to this moment in your life?
Well,
Sharing this,
that question, yeah, that got
sharing
that
this
got there
message.
again. Yeah, about this piece about our bodies. I know that your beautiful group is Peace with Food. And as we had discussed talking today about taste and how it relates with food, it all to me is a concentrated exploration of how we live our lives. And until, as I love to say, as it being a sci-fi fantasy geek, and I like Harry Potter, until we can throw the powder into the flue like Harry Potter does and magically transport places, we are living our lives in our bodies. And so if we have any kind of discomfort or any disconnection or any kind of suffering about what it's like to live in this body, that's going to have something to do and affect the rest of my life and all of my life, how I'm living. And so to to that, I was, as a very young child, was assaulted at a very young age, and I learned my body was a bad place to be. And was pretty much like that until the age of 40, when, for a whole bunch of reasons that we can discuss, I realized I had one and that it was time for me to live in it. And did a lot of work learning about what it was to finally inhabit it and how to make it feel peaceful. That's the real driving answer. I mean, I can also tell you that I was a clinician and a social worker and was working with children and families and women in violence, and discovered at that time, this was like 25 years ago, that um, things as obvious as if we had got a good night's sleep was important to families who were in severe poverty, severe crises, violence. And it became clear to me then, as a professional, that how we're living in our bodies really affects how we're living our lives.
Mhm.
And when we're not able to take care of just how this raw material is and how we're relating to it, nothing else really can be completely peaceful. And yeah, so that's the fastest, most concentrated answer I can give you, because as you said, there's just 1,000 things to say, because the body is so marvelously complex and
Mhm.
we relate to it in so many just juicy, real, hard, complicated ways, that to say any single thing about how we experience it or how we're here is not an easy thing to do in a minute.
No, it's definitely not. You brought up a couple different things is really the basics, right?
Mm,
It's like
mm,
coming back to basics. Like people, I think when people are really struggling with liking their body, or dealing with
mm,
their food, it can feel so overwhelming. It's like,
Yes.
where do I start? What do I do? And then because there's so much information on how to get healthy, and there's
Mhm.
such a bombardment of this information coming at us. And what I heard you say is just go to bed on time. Get some good rest. Just like drink some water. Like start taking care of yourself and start tuning in.
Mhm.
Can you say a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Well, the reason it's funny, I'm licensing something called the body method, which is a process of becoming comfortable with our bodies. And it's really just a fancy way to do the thing that I think you and I do, and that probably everyone listening is trying to do, and 98% of the women in the world are trying to do, which is to be comfortable with the bodies that we're in so we can live the lives we want. And the first step for me is always being in your actual biology, which is hard. And the beauty, like, if we're drawn to honor the body, which I think that at least you and I are, and I'm guessing if we're here in this group, there's some desire, like, I really want to like just feel good about it. I want to be comfortable and at peace with it. Um, we have to start with what we actually are. That can we just start with the real? I like to talk about the word reality, the real of ourselves. And what's so beautiful to me about that is that when we do, we're also accessing the divine, that this energy that we are, the feelings that we have, the souls that we get to occupy or occupy us, we access through the reality of our bodies. That's my belief. And, as a former yoga teacher, steeply immersed in Vedic tradition and the Hindu understanding, which is that we are not our bodies, I've come to peace with that by saying, we're not our bodies as we've been attached to understanding them.
Yes.
That, right? It's that
A good
actually,
reframing. Yes.
it's that our body is actually our housing, our souls, and there, anyway. So, oh, girl, you get me talking about this and I could just not shut up. So what else should we say? Yes.
So, the interesting thing is that just that step that you're talking about, like getting into the reality and getting into, and maybe you wouldn't say this quite yet in the method that you're teaching, almost getting into the acceptance of what is, can be so scary
Oh,
and
yes, exactly.
so
Yes.
freaking confronting. Like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, like this is what is really happening right now.
Yes. And listen, having worked with a woman without arms and legs, a woman who is in braces, someone working in a wheelchair. Listen, being in our physical reality doesn't necessarily mean that it's all pretty and like, ooh, elevated and light. That's not it at all. In fact, one of my most precious clients, who I know sometimes listens to these talks, and she always like, that's me, has leg braces, and came to me actually because she wanted to be more comfortable with touch, because she had I'm forgetting the word for it, but a rigidity. So she reacts and gets very rigid and is in a lot of pain. But after working together on the somatic piece, which is to me is the soul body, like being with what is, and then understanding it as an energy, she realized she didn't really want to be touched. And that part of the soul work was about finding a way to live her life in her actual body that was right for her. And so, yes or no, it's not easy to actually be with the bodies we have. Forget about like profound or dramatic physical challenges. I mean, I might not like feeling in my body because I'm either feeling fat or I'm feeling something that's uncomfortable, or maybe, or as something as raw as quote ordinary as I'm tired, but I have to keep working,
Mm.
or I want to rest, but my kid's yelling at me. You
Yeah.
know, it's like the reality of actually occupying our physical truth is it's not an easy thing.
No,
And
it's not.
right. And so, yeah, to actually be able to do that, as a first step to me is how the transformation happens. I'll just say this one thing because it literally is on my mind. I was working just this morning with a woman who is actually a professional therapist and is smart as hell, as just does beautiful work with women, and actually became a new mother, and has her own stories about having been angry, and there's lots of family history there, and she understands perfectly that anger is a feeling, that it's okay to be angry. She's very strongly identified with women's empowerment, the whole thing. And then having the experience when she was completely wiped out, exhausted, she had got her period, she hadn't slept, she got sick, her child got sick, and she woke up on the weekend, she woke up pissed. And she went out and started, railing at her husband, which is part of the thing that she's been working on. But she had enough of the work in her to realize, okay, wait, I just am really angry. I'm not actually angry at him. I'm angry. I feel furious. That for her was an expression of what happened when she was exhausted. And she just said, I believe she used the word barf. I need to just barf out my anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then she felt better. And she described having the best weekend day that she had had as long as she could remember, with her husband and her baby. And that to me is like the whole somatic principle. And what happens when we start with just the real of who we are, and why it's like being able to just be, quote, ordinary, or in our biology, it's the profound thing. And it's also the access point. Like when she just got to feel, I'm not going to fight the fact that I woke up pissed, and I'm going to be pissed. It changed, so yes, biology. It's good stuff.
Biology. It's really good. And I love that example of the anger. And
Mm,
what comes to me is like we get uncomfortable in our bodies. We feel fat, or we have a lot of emotion that we haven't dealt with.
yes.
And that emotion ends up stacking up. And that emotion sometimes, the only way to get I'll say it from my experience, the only way to get my attention to deal with my body was my brain would turn it into some sort of like, I'm fat or something's wrong with me or I'm eating too much. That's what got my attention to actually pay attention to myself.
Yes.
And so, but what I would do is then I would end up dieting over it or over exercising. That was my way of meeting it.
Mm-hmm,
Right.
mm-hmm,
And then
mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I got smart enough because I've always been smart, but in this area, I was never been smart, right?
Yeah.
Began to tune into, oh, I'm uncomfortable. The answer is not dieting. The answer is not
Right.
moving my body and to get out of my body so that I feel disconnected and detached, right? It's to actually lean in and
Yes. Yes.
lean in. And I had this experience the other morning where I just was like feeling, and I just started crying and just crying and crying and crying.
Mm.
And it's like, I've heard so many women say, and I wonder if you get this too, I don't know why I'm sad. Like, my life is fine. I'm good. I'm like, why am I crying? And I'm just like, that's one of our superpowers, is to be able to feel our emotions and cry. I don't doubt that anymore. I'm just like, I need to cry, I'm going to cry, and then I get to move on. I don't even have to connect a story to the
Yeah.
emotion. Like, life
Yeah.
is good. That was a really good morning after I cried.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And it's so beautiful that you share that. Literally yesterday, I was leading a workshop where we do this work of just allowing ourselves to be present with as we are, practicing just being in presence with what we feel and withdrawing our attention from the outside, just to be present. And this beautiful soul who was English, as in from Britain, shared that when she closed her eyes, she said it was hard. She said it was hard to put the outside world in. But her big share at the end, when we were just processing together, was how surprised she was that she felt sad and that she wanted to cry. And my response was brilliant, brilliant. Like, that's it. Like what? I mean, yes, we want to know why. Yes, there might be something very specific that wants your attention. Like, oh my God, I'm really sad about that thing that happened yesterday, right? Like, oh shit, sorry, I like to swear. Like I am sad about something that wants my love. And thank you, sad. Thank you for showing me or for giving me the outlet for what I need, or like tears. So yeah, I love that. I'm glad you had a good day afterwards.
Yes, me too.
I kind of envy that. I wish I could have a cry like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're 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 easy for me to access when I actually am like, oh, I just need to cry.
That's awesome.
No,
That really
yeah.
is. That's so cool. It's like that is a
It
superpower,
is
Marla.
a superpower. I remember sitting in the car with my husband, Olaf, and crying and just crying and crying. And I was like, okay, I'm better. And he's like, I am so jealous that you can do that.
Yeah,
To
smart man.
access that. Yeah. I was like, wow, like you're so
That
lucky.
really is cool. Wow. Now I just want to sit at your feet. Tell me about you.
Let's stay with you. Let's stay with you. So we're talking about biology and we're
Mm.
talking, and this whole thing was about our taste and our
Yes.
senses,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And allowing more of that, right? I've studied a lot of Tantra, and that Tantra always gets this idea that it's just a sexual thing, but it's really life and opening up our senses to receive life. And here
Yes.
we are in this group of learning how to be in our bodies in a pleasurable way
Yep.
and to enjoy food in a way that feels good.
Yep.
And then we have this sense of taste. And I'd love to hear more of what is coming through you around that. Because when I'd asked you what you wanted to share with this, I'm like, ooh, more. So tell
So,
me more.
well, oh, it's such a fascinating topic. You know what? I think that when we originally connected, I was actually doing tantric practices specifically to awaken the senses in the body as a healing modality, right? That's the fancy thing.
Mhm.
And bringing it closer to home, I literally, about 10 minutes before we spoke today, I was hungry and thought it's time to eat and had a revelation about my relationship with taste. Because yes, taste as tantric practices or the pujas for the senses that I facilitate and participate in is exactly that. That as we experience taste, we experience our vitality. We experience this rich, robust, exotic perfume of our aliveness through our senses. And I read from the Radiant Sutras, which, as you know, is like this tantric teaching Bible about how to be alive in our bodies, not per se as sexual at all, but to see, to hear music. One of my favorite sutras is, to rock a crying baby in the night or hear the clink of glasses or the crackle of the fireplace. It's not about, okay, like I said, I like to swear. It's not fucking. It's like aliveness in your body. So yes, there's taste in that way. What I realized today is that taste as it relates to eating for me is one of the most intimate acts that I do with myself as myself completely alone, where I don't have to perform for anyone. That when I eat, and so when I taste something, the reason that I originally reached out to you is that I was aware that it's of our senses, one of the most inner ones
Mhm.
that we hear comes from outside, what we see comes from outside, touch we can do externally and internally, but taste or smell is something from the outside. Taste we do inside. And so I was thinking how curious it was, and I was just kind of freestyling, thinking, well, what is taste? I thought about for women that yes, our as we know, our reproductive system, our genitals are inside, and so much of being a woman is an internal, in some broad stroke ways, like this internal thing. I thought, isn't that interesting? That taste and food and the feminine, because yes, we understand that as women, we have a higher rate of, quote, eating disorders. clearly because of the social environment we're in, clearly because of, I would say, the patriarchy in every way that we've been treated as women. And like, let's look around in there and see what else about being female may or may not have something to do with how we interact with food and our sexuality. And it's all interesting. But what I got today was when I put something in my mouth and I have the pleasure of eating, because I love to eat. I spent the first 20 years of my life anorexic. I then spent the next 15 years medically obese. I've done it all. I've been the same height and weighed 80 pounds difference. Is that right? Yes. And so I've done the range. What I've fought for is the knowledge that I like to eat. I love food. I love food. And I'm also aware that food is still one of my self-soothing techniques. I know that. I accept that. There's so many things I don't do. I know that for me, my little gluten-free macaroni and cheese is a beautiful, I have a good relationship with it. Today, I went deeper into understanding potentially what that's about. I think it's because I spend so much of my time, as has been true for so much of my life, trying to look the right way, trying to act the right way, trying to be the right way, whether or not it's in codependency, that's the fancy clinical word, or being who I don't really feel like I am, but I'm supposed to be, whether or not it's a size or a smile or an attitude, that when I eat, it's just me. It is just fucking me. And it is so relieving. It's such a relief to not have to perform or do anything other than what I experience after I taste something. And that was a huge revelation for a lifelong eating awareness human. That was a big deal for me. So I have no idea all the wisdom that you have, because I know that this is your specialty, but it was certainly fascinating for me.
Yeah, it really touches me. I feel that. I would say in my own journey, this piece of slowing down with food is still
Mm-hmm.
confronting to me.
Yeah.
It still confronts me. My son, who's 10, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting and I made these muffins and I'm not sitting. I'm standing. I stand and eat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my son says, Mama, come sit down with me. And I'm like, you want me to sit and eat my muffin? Yeah, you need to sit down. And I was just like, thank you, God, for coming through
Yes.
my child in this wisdom, right? And I feel what you're saying here is that these moments it's a moment of me. It's just
Yeah.
me. No
Nurture.
one gets to take that away. Wait, we're in this fast-paced world where everyone's doing all these things, and
Yeah.
women are looking for moments of self-care and these moments where we can be with food and say, this is just for me,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Right. I mean, like, holy cow. And the fact that I'm sorry, go on.
No,
I,
you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you reminded me actually when I was nursing my first child, and I remember standing over the sink eating the cinnamon chip scone frantically, like hurriedly, with this sense of like, I mean, like, my mind understands this as a clinician and having my history, but I knew that I was like, quote, self-soothing. And I knew that the thing to do was to go slow. I feel like today what I got was another layer of how doing those things is very hard. And actually, like in real daily, day to day, hour to hour ways, that I've devoted my life now these last years to refining, like being alone, loving myself, falling in love with me, letting it be okay to actually be who I am, and recognizing how hard that is. Not just to smile because someone smiles at me, not to say yes if someone asks me to do something. The constant refinement of just being the self, which I believe is what we're all here to be, and what I believe all of us, or any of us, are really doing, is just allowing the space to be the vitality and the perfection of who we are. To actually be able to do that, taste and food, or eating, which taste is so strongly associated, is is this way to put out the whole rest of the world and actually celebrate, to nourish, to enjoy my utter selfhood, my complete uniqueness, where nobody else gets to tell me how to chew, how to eat, although I'm sure I've done that in my past too. It's revelatory. To me, it is.
Yes, it is. And I realize for those who are, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Right.
Yeah.
And how do I get into that? I'm aware of some of the first steps in that for myself.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please. What do you see?
So I realized because I had so much restriction on myself, and there was all
Mhm.
these ways that, oh, great, now I'm supposed to actually enjoy my food, really, right?
Yes, yes.
And so for
Yes,
me to allow myself to eat fast and have no judgment and to eat mindlessly and to just shove it in my mouth and just
yes,
like, and the enjoyment of having a whole mouthful of food, like,
yes,
and how enjoyable that is too, right?
yes. Thank you.
And that
Yes.
piece is like really was really important to me,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And
Thank
I
you.
also hear that the piece that you're sharing is it's
Mm.
a deepening of a process that I see a lot of myself included is there's food can be a great place to rebel,
Mm.
right? Like
Yes,
we
yes,
we don't do it in all the other ways in the world, but
yes.
you
Thank
want
you.
me to be a good girl? Well, fuck you. I'm not doing it. I'm going to eat this thing and I'm going to do it in secret and you're not going to know, but I'm going to do it, right?
Right, right. Or not
Or
eat it.
not,
Right.
right?
I'm control it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you want me to eat? Yeah, I'm going to control it. Yes, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you're saying is, and I love this so much, is the deepening of this rebel that gets to say,
Mm.
I get to enjoy my food for
Yes.
me,
Yes. Yeah. God.
only
Ooh,
me.
no, turn down when you said that. I was like,
Ooh,
yes.
yes.
It is. It's so, God, wow. Yes. Yes, like I feel like I felt that when you said that, and I feel like I want whoever is listening to this to like take a moment and actually see if you can drop into what it feels like to rebel and make food like I'm going to have this exactly the way I want it without any restriction, whether or not it's eating fast or eating slow or eating two things that are different at the same time, just to like have that freedom of actual interaction. I mean, I feel that in my like colon.
Feel it in
How,
my legs, way down in
like,
my
right? It's like, oh, I mean, it also brings me to tears. The relief. I think that's what really struck me today, and what I've been interacting with as I'm anyway writing about some of this is how intimate food is, and with ourselves that I right now I run a course called Ready for Intimacy. It's about body acceptance to be able to be intimate. So I'm looking a lot at what is intimacy, and how do we really have intimacy with another unless we can have it with ourselves. And so what are the ways that we actually interact with ourselves intimately, and how do we do that? And we know that so much of that is I can't even look at myself. I mean, hello, I can barely look in a mirror. I mean, now I spent 54 years doing the body stuff, and now the last three I'm like, oh God, I'm getting old and I got to do it about my face. But right, so we have all of that, just how to be okay. But then like, and how do we like craft loving intimacy with ourselves? How do we feel that juicy aliveness that we are so clear we might want from a partner or in somebody else? How do we do that with ourselves? And just hearing you say that, I literally felt this kind of a slightly orgasmic in like the whole body way of like, oh yes, if I can give that to myself, how is that different from like the best connection with a lover or a spouse? That like full bodied, yes, I see you and I'm going to give you everything you want. Like, what? Can you imagine having a lover like that? Right? I
And
mean,
yet we do,
maybe
right?
you do. I know you do. Okay. And so
No,
elucidate.
I was saying yes, I do,
Yeah.
and yet we do, right? And and that leads us to what you were saying is like if we don't have this acceptance with with our bodies, then we're not going to have the life that we want to live, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so here we are wanting to fix things.
Yeah.
And the place to fix it is in this deeper relationship with self, in this deeper place of intimacy, and becoming that friend to ourselves, that deep.
Mm. Yes. And, I'm thinking about specifically, since we're meant to be talking about taste and eating, peace with food, and what you said too about having been restrictive, and how for you one of the first steps to freedom or to peace was in letting yourself eat fast or have a whole mouthful of food, and to try different modalities. And it reminds me of a beautiful woman I worked with who was struggling with so much of what we're talking about, like how to be comfortable with herself, how to live a life that was not in sacrifice, and she was really sacrificing herself all the time in work and with her family, and she was very unhappy. And we were talking about food, and she actually had grown up lactose intolerant with a parent that was so neglectful she was constantly being served dairy. And somehow I didn't even know this as we were talking. It was one of our first sessions. And I said somehow she said something about cheese. And I suggested just go and just taste the cheese and spit it. This before I knew she was lactose intolerant. I said, can you just taste it and then spit out what you don't like? She said something about that particular food. And we got to the place of realizing that actually in her case, she had cheese kind of thrust upon her as a sign of neglect, in a sense, and that actually it made her feel physically sick. Mm-hmm. And so it was this moment of being in presence with her true self, the way her body actually felt, the way her reality was in that moment, where she realized, get the cheese the fuck away from me. like I don't want it to touch my mouth. I don't want to see it. I reject that food. And that it just speaks to this thing of what you're saying about let it be your own first step. What is your first step to how you're interacting with food for your body, i.e. yourself?
Right.
I mean, it's like that's it. And whatever that is, it's like that to me is the real, that's the step to freedom, is to realize you don't have to look at anybody else, or you don't have to listen to Janet and Marla talk about how much they love to eat or whatever, right? You may be like, I don't want cheese ever again.
Right.
I don't have to eat it. And so we have so many stories also about being told to finish our plate and eat all the good things that you're supposed to. And I mean, I know I did that too. I went through years of, I don't know if it was orthorexia, but I was such a good eater. I was going to go the raw food thing. And I almost punched a hole in my gut because I wasn't actually paying attention to what my body was telling me it actually wanted. I was relentless, and I'm going to eat all that raw food, and I'm going to take care of my digestion and my poop and all that. Oh my God. I mean, I hurt myself.
Right.
And so it's who are you today? What's your truth? Can we just allow for that? As a sign, for me, the word that comes is as a sign of love or as a sign of intimacy, the kind of in our lives,
Thank you so much, Janet.
Oh, thank you for letting me just talk away. It's such a loving space.
Yeah, and thank you for having that aha this morning. Isn't that what happens, right? You go to put something out there and you get asked to share, and then you have the aha 10 minutes before you come on to share that wisdom. I mean, you're the channel for other people to heal, right? And you're open to that. So I'm so grateful for your presence. I'm so grateful for what you do. I'm so glad to know I have a sister in this who lives.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you to holding this beautiful space for women on a path of freedom and peace, for holding space to share your wisdom, and so that these women can share with each other. And because we all are suffering from this in some degree.
Yeah.
We can't, I really don't believe we can be women in the modern world and not have some suffering of how we relate with food, how we relate with our bodies.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible unless we've taken your course or mine or
Well, speaking of that, what would be the best way for people to be in touch with you and to get more
um,
of your specific medicine?
sure. That's thank
What
you. Yeah,
website or what is
just Facebook, just Janet Farnsworth, just message me and I will message you back personally. That's probably the best way. I also have a website, which is my name. I can send you a free one of my books if you'd like, because it's your folks, your community. I would be happy to do that. Probably the easiest thing, because this is, Facebook or YouTube. It's just look up my name and you can contact me and I'll answer you personally.
beautiful? Great. And I'll put the links to Janet below.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. Have a yummy, yummy
Yummy.
vegetable.
Yes. Yummy. Have a yum. Let us all
Yummy.
have yummy yummies.
Let's have yummy yummies. Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Blessings.